When we started educating folks about the idea of Bitcoin staking last year, a lot of people tell us, Bitcoin holders are very conservative. They'll never do anything else on the Bitcoin other than hold it. But our experience in our interaction with the community in the past years, I think, have shown otherwise.
Today's episode is brought to you by Akash Network, the world's premier decentralized compute marketplace. Check out Akash to buy and sell computing resources securely and efficiently. Purpose-built for public utility at akash.network. All right, well, it is a very exciting time for all of the Bitcoin-related projects as the year rolls on, and Babylon, perhaps one of the most watched, as we just saw their huge test take off in the world of Bitcoin staking. And back on Coinage with us today, the co-founder of Babylon, David Tse. David, good to have you back on Coinage, my friend.
Hey, Zach, great to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a few months since we had you on last time, and obviously the big update happened at the end of August as you guys finally opened the test for people to begin staking Bitcoin, capped at 1,000 Bitcoins, but the rush for people to get involved early on led to a surge in Bitcoin fees, so there was clearly demand for people to do this. Just want to start with kind of what your takeaways were from that beginning test and what you saw in kind of this first launch of Babylon.
Yeah, so this is the first time that Bitcoin can be used for staking, a trustless use case. From a broader perspective, we believe this is one of the very few use cases of Bitcoin beyond a payment system that can be done in a trustless fashion. That means does not require any third-party custodial. So the mainnet launch we did a few weeks ago is the first time to doubt how much demand or how much interest there is from the Bitcoin holders on this protocol. And we were quite excited that there was quite significant demand. One measure of that is the transaction fees that was paid to get into the cap. I think it was about 80 to 100x over the previous block before the launch happened. So that is one metric that shows people's interest. So we are quite excited about that.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I think we have Texas. We have a shot of kind of where those fees were. Obviously, this is the article that was saying $105 in terms of fees. Back then, I think, again, for people who might not understand, there's a fee to be paid in terms of priority for the miners, Bitcoin miners, to throw these transactions in there. And so everyone was kind of trying to get in before that 1,000 Bitcoin cap was hit. And you're seeing there some of the fees that existed back then shooting as high as we said, north of $100. And if you look now, I'm pretty sure the fees are down to like 25 cents in terms of high priority right now, which is obviously very different. So, I mean, as a co-founder of all this, to see such a huge impact on the Bitcoin network itself, David, I mean, what does that kind of do for your guys' team? What does that mean for you personally as a guy who's been building this project for a while to see such a huge impact on launch day? With only, 1,000 Bitcoins really in play for people to stake. What were kind of some of the takeaways?
Yeah, I think one of the takeaway that we can see of the huge demand for this admittedly small cap is that I think people think of this as, in some sense, a event of some historical significance. That is the first time in which Bitcoin staking appears. And I think a lot of people wants to be there at the beginning of this historical event.
When it comes to like kind of some people were confused because they're like, why are people kind of rushing and paying high fees to get involved now? I understand that there's points attached, but you guys have been pretty clear about, look, those points don't have necessarily any real value. So, I mean, anecdotally, I mean, outside of, look, people were clearly excited to get into this test. Outside of that, anecdotally, what do you think is kind of the upsides outside of it being historic that people individually, on an individual basis, are most excited about as this continues to grow?
The thing is that there will be multiple caps, right? So this is only the first cap. And I think, yeah, I think to us, this is also a opportunity for many Bitcoin holders. So I think one of the reason why when you say $100, that refers to a staking transaction.
Hmm.
We intentionally kept the staking transaction very small. The maximum is 0.05 Bitcoin, and the goal here is to allow as many different Bitcoin holders to just try out the system. You know, go through the staking experience, either going through our staking dashboard, or going through a wallet provider, or going through their own infrastructure. It is just a way for people to try this thing out at a very small amount so that hopefully they can participate more in future caps as we increase them.
Yeah, and as we discussed last time, I mean, for people who are kind of new to this idea of why people would stake Bitcoin in the first place, I think they should go back and watch our interview that we had you on for before, where we got kind of deep into the reasons and why this all exists. But I assume for you guys as well, from a team and learning in keeping those caps pretty small, I'm sure you guys learned some things too. You obviously had support from OKX and Binance and other wallet providers here as well to kind of onboard as many people as you said. That's the point of doing this, not just kind of big whales, but actual users. What comes next? In as you say, you're kind of going to roll this out in phased caps. What's kind of the roadmap based on what you learned in the first one? What should people expect? And maybe did it change any of the roadmaps you had thought you might have in place based on what you learned?
Yeah, we are still analyzing the data. The thing is that to us, each cap is a experiment that allows us to collect valuable data, users' behavior, stickers' behavior. This is a pretty brand new product here that no one has deployed before on Bitcoin. So user behavior is interesting. So we're still analyzing a lot of the data to design the second cap. So we would like to, yeah, it was. I must say it was quite impressive that the 1,000 Bitcoin cap was filled in the first 6 blocks, and actually 6 blocks is the fastest it can fill because of the cap we have on each transaction, on each staking transaction. We need about 21,000 staking transactions to fill the cap, and each Bitcoin block is only 3 or 4 thousand transactions. So 5 or 6 blocks is the minimum that you can get, and we fill it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
so
pretty. I
that's a
mean,
very
obviously,
interesting, I think.
yeah, no, it is interesting, and it's also one of the few opportunities I think to see this in the wild. So obviously, when the fees shot up, a lot of people were wondering what the hell was going on. Babylon was the answer. Babylon was going on, and I'm sure we're going to see this again as it plays out. But just to kind of back up, David, and think about the opportunities here now as they exist. Obviously, throughout the whole year, we've been seeing more money pour into Bitcoin ETFs, maybe not constantly up and to the right, but more money coming in, ebbs and flows of the summer. I mean, as this all unfolds, clearly it does seem like Bitcoin's dominance is here to stay. I'm curious how some of that continues to play into, you know, tailwinds for Babylon as you guys grow. How do you envision kind of seeing what you guys are offering to Bitcoiners maybe becoming even juicier, so to speak, as those Bitcoin ETFs grow in size? They can't really do much of anything with the Bitcoin they hold right now, but do you see that changing, and kind of how do you project those things as we go through 2024?
Yeah. So we started the Babylon project about 2.5 years ago, way before the Bitcoin ETFs got issued. It is because we're based on a long-term firm belief that Bitcoin is really here to stay. Bitcoin is the most secure blockchain. It's the oldest blockchain. And so we were working this project even before Bitcoin was have this resurgence of interest that you mentioned. Um, so we believe that a very important uh, thing for Bitcoin going forward is to increase the use cases of Bitcoin beyond just a store of value. So if you think about the Bitcoin ETF, is entirely a store of value play. people but deposit the Bitcoin in the ETF and they just but there's no yield on those Bitcoin. There's no yield. Most um, would like yield. So that's the use case that we create for Bitcoin. And very importantly, this use case is a trustless use case.
Yeah, when it comes to that yield, though, I guess maybe it is worth hitting again in the idea of unlocking the power of Bitcoin beyond a store of value. It's really about, I think, unlocking the value of token holders, Bitcoin holders, and letting them, tap into the value of what Bitcoin's become. We talked about this a little bit last time, but how do you explain it to people who are new in the space? And kind of what does the roadmap look like in terms of delivering on that and changing people's ideas of Bitcoin just being digital gold to being something that can be unlocked? The value can be unlocked through Babylon. Like, how is that going?
Yeah, when we started um, educating folks about the idea of Bitcoin staking last year, a lot of people tell us, Bitcoin holders are very conservative. They'll never do anything else on the Bitcoin other than hold it. But our experience in our interaction with the community in the past years, I think, have shown otherwise, and is particularly demonstrated in this first cap of the mainnet launch. That indeed there are a lot of people with a lot of interest. There are um, 20,000, uh, 13 to 15,000 distinct address of people who successfully staked on this main cap. So I think, you know, our understanding is that Bitcoin holders is not like a totally different beast, different from any other crypto holders. Bitcoin holders also hold Ethereum, and Ethereum, people already got used to the idea that you can use Ethereum and do staking to provide security. And basically here, we're bringing back this idea, this concept to Bitcoin. So I don't really think subscribe to this idea that Bitcoin holders are like totally weird, different animals compared to other people. So that's sort of I think our learnings and also our observation.
Yeah, it is an interesting kind of piece of all that. And obviously, it's a wide world. It includes a lot of demos, and Bitcoin being distinct, I suppose, from all the other altcoins and communities beyond it is true. And it does attract a lot of people who have always trumpeted the store of value kind of concept and digital gold pieces. But from what I understand, in terms of the roadmap for you guys at Babylon, increasingly it's about leveraging Bitcoin's power as, the most secure blockchain to then help other networks as well. And you guys are building that out. I mean, how do you do you take them in parts? Do you take in saying, look, first we need to convince enough people, like you just said, to stake with us, and then we can work on all the other things? I mean, how do you see that roadmap in terms of integrating
Yeah.
Bitcoin security into proof of stake systems? So what's kind of the checkpoints along the way?
Yeah, so there are several directions in our roadmap. One, very importantly, is to uh, have this change of mindset to proof of stake networks, that the security of these networks is best provided by Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is such a large asset, and the security is proportional to this asset. So I think we would like to move away of networks purely relying on a very volatile native asset as the security basis, and combine it or replace it by Bitcoin. I think that requires a change of mindset, and I think with this broader restaking narrative that has appeared in the past 1 year, I think we're making some headway there. So that's one direction. Another direction, which is very important as well, is that we see that what we see right now in Babylon is that staking, because it's such a basic primitive, has become something that people can kind of build on top of. So an example is that we're seeing a lot of new liquid staking protocols that are built on top of Babylon. So in other words, you first stake and then you do something else with it. In the case of LSTs, or liquid staking, is to provide a liquidity receipt for people to use on the DeFi application. So we see now the role of Babylon bit staking is in some sense analogous to the role of ETH staking, which
Hmm.
was introduced about 2 years ago. The merge was in 2022 September, where it became a basic primitive for people to build other DeFi applications on top of.
Yeah, I was having this discussion with our producer here, who is always a little bit skeptical about crypto use cases and this idea of, okay, what does staking unlock in terms of anything beyond just, I guess, helping miners and seeing transaction costs go up because there's demand to get included every time you guys raise the cap. But this idea of staking, and as you said, kind of liquid staking and restaking, is kind of just self rehypothecation. As if you want to be a pessimist about the view of what this is really doing, instead of having banks take in deposits, loan them out, and do everything with them, you're kind of giving the power to an individual user to stake and restake and do things like that. Is that the way you look at it, or is it different when David Tse
Mm,
looks into kind of how he presents this to the world? Is it's not
mm.
just like self rehypothecation; it's leveraging security of an underlying network. I mean, it's very hard to create a parallel metaphor, I think.
Yeah. So, the word staking actually has a very specific technical meaning, right? The word staking comes from proof of stake, which is a way of using an asset to provide security to a blockchain. The one, the main, the central key difference between Web3 and Web2 is that Web3 is decentralized. Decentralized requires security, and so uh, it is security is central to Web3. And in my mind, staking is providing this very, very central functionality. So it's not just a matter of lend money and so forth. So I think one of the problems in terms of terminology nowadays is that now people are using staking in a very general and ambiguous sense. They're using it for many different things. But in my mind, it is best to reserve the word staking for this original meaning, which is to provide security. And in the
Hmm.
Web3 world, security is everything.
I'm glad you mentioned decentralization because I think that's an important part. Obviously, again, we're going to see, I think, the FTX distributions for everyone who got caught up in that come out either Q4 or early into next year. That will be interesting to see what those kind of quote unquote victims want to do with their payouts and whether or not they just get out altogether or start, allocating some of that once it's once it's released. But on the other side, we're also seeing more kind of projects pop up to create wrapped Bitcoin alternatives to what has been the
Mm,
leader in the space in
mm,
Bitcoin, BitGo's product in their wrapped Bitcoin. You
mm,
also had Coinbase. Taking a look at another article, Coinbase just launching CBBTC in their token. That Cointelegraph here says may revolutionize Bitcoin DeFi adoption. And that's kind of interesting because, again, another centralized company here, Coinbase. Um, and all it really is just custodying Bitcoin that people put in and having another wrapped token in what Base is trying to do. But David, when you look at that, I mean, I could see it as a pro for kind of, getting people more excited about what they can do with their Bitcoin. I could see it as a con because maybe it shifts, people's Bitcoin somewhere else and into another project that might not benefit you. Or I don't know. How do you look at kind of what Coinbase is trying to do there and the overall excitement growing, I think, in this Bitcoin DeFi space?
Yeah, so we don't see this as another competition, and therefore worry about it. I think in our mind, right, Babylon focus is on building trustless protocols. Trustless protocols. So as I emphasized at the beginning, Bitcoin staking is one of the first, in addition to the payment, as a trustless use case. So, and our goal and our contribution to Web3 is, I think, to shift away from such centralized custodial. The example you mentioned was Coinbase, but Coinbase is also a centralized custodial. So we're trying to shift that away, and I think a lot more research needs to be done in this direction. is, for example, how do you create a wrap asset in a trustless fashion? Do we really need a centralized custodian like Coinbase to issue one, or can one then do it in a trustless fashion? I think there are some very good progress in the technological direction of doing that, and we are actively doing research, actively collaborating with other folks to push in that beyond Bitcoin staking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me play devil's advocate there too, though, just from like revealed preference perspective. In terms of Coinbase, technically custodies most of the Bitcoin through the Bitcoin ETFs. I think they are the custodian of choice for the majority of those ETFs, and it hasn't stopped billions of dollars from flowing in. So I don't know if you look at that and say, well, what the hell? Maybe product market fit here isn't really the idea of trustlessness until you see another blow up like FTX or something like that. I mean, it seems kind of counterintuitive to the idea of why people are in Web3 and Bitcoin, as you said, to see that play out and people not really care that all of them are kind of using the same custodian, or Coinbase is just too big to fail. And if they go down, everything in crypto is dead anyways. So, I mean, how do you look at that?
I'm sure there's a lot of, it's true, a lot of the Bitcoin ETFs are custodied right now on Coinbase, but I'm sure there are a lot of efforts right now of diversifying such a custodization across different custodians.
Yeah,
This
I
is
think
still
it
the
is.
early. I mean, we're still talking about like less than a year since these Bitcoin ETF has been issued, so we're still early in the industry.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
you're right. I mean, yes, you're right. Overall, it's a broader theme, which is people do. There is a decentralization pressure or centralization effort that people keep on going back to. But I think we are in this Web3 in the long run, right? In the long run, we would like to have more decentralization, and I think that should not stop us from doing what we should be doing.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And uh, FTX is a very valuable lesson that people should learn from. Because if there are a few more of these FTX incidents, then our industry is kind of doomed. FTX is already creating a very serious damage to our industry.
Yeah, there's no shortage of other examples to point to too, in terms of BlockFi and Celsius and all the other centralized lenders, so to speak, for sure. But to end and wrap up, David, on kind of a more positive outlook for what is to come as you guys continue releasing space for people to get involved here and the roadmap. I mean, when you say caps are going to be lifted, when they're going to be coming, how often are you seeing these play out? What's kind of the next one to pay attention to? Let our viewers know what they should be excited about.
Yeah, probably we are shooting for the next cap in a few weeks, probably roughly in the early October timeframe. That's the second cap. Um, and there will probably be a third cap, but we're not completely sure on that. We'll have to observe what happens in the second cap first. Going forward, we'll be shifting from phase 1 to phase 2 in a few months. In phase 2, we have now we'll use the Bitcoin that is staked in the first phase to provide security to the first proof of stake chain, which is the Babylon chain, which we are launching ourselves. That our chain acts as a coordination layer for the other proof of stake chains to come in phase 3. So that's the sort of where we are: phase 1, 2, and 3.
Got it. Very clean. I think it's a very clean way to look at kind of building the plane as it's flying, as everybody is doing in Web3, to kind of have
Yes.
a course of action. Got to get there in the end, but you got to start somewhere. And you guys, congratulations again on finally getting started with the test of 1,000 Bitcoin cap and the demand that you all saw there. Last question though, before we let you go, David, as we always kind of do, we always like ending with smart founders such as yourself on bold predictions. Bold predictions to come. There are only a few months left. It's crazy to think how fast it's gone, but there are only a few months left in 2024. Curious to have your bold predictions in the world of Bitcoin as you see them kind of shaping up here to wrap up the year. What you expect as your bold prediction in the Bitcoin space before the year is out?
Before the year is out, my bold prediction is that we will see the first indication of the ability to do trustless bridging, which is, I believe, central to this idea of creating wrap asset in a trustless fashion. That is the one missing piece of the puzzle right now. And I think we'll see some indication of that at the end of the year.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of projects chase that space and the idea of what that all looks like. And we had Thorchain on earlier looking at the idea of some of these swaps and things like that. Very fascinating to see everything come out in real time. Certainly more use cases than ever before when it comes to things people can do with their crypto, more largely their Bitcoin. David Tse, can't thank you enough for coming back on, man. Congrats on everything running over there at Babylon, the co-founder of Babylon. David Tse, thanks again, man.
Thanks so much, Zach.